1985 began like so many other mornings in America. Quiet streets, cold air, a new day starting. The newspaper arrived with a simple headline: January 1985. Just another year or so it seemed. School buses rolled through quiet neighborhoods, stopping at the same corners they had for years. Inside classrooms, kids wrote in their notebooks, not knowing they were growing up in one of the most iconic decades in history. Teenagers walked the streets with a new companion, a Walkman and a cassette tape playing their favorite song. At home, the television was still the center of the world. Families gathered around a glowing screen, watching the same shows at the same time. Electronic stores were filled with machines that looked like the future. Across American cities, neon lights flickered to life as night arrived. And somewhere between those quiet suburbs and the towering skyline of New York, 1985 was about to become a year people would never forget. In 1985, going to the movies wasn't just entertainment. It was an event. Outside theaters, teenagers lined up for a film that would become legendary: Back to the Future. Another movie captured the spirit of the decade. Rocky IV, where a boxing match felt like the Cold War itself. But music was everywhere, and MTV had become the center of youth culture. Michael Jackson was still the biggest star on the planet. Madonna was rewriting the rules of pop music and turning every performance into a spectacle. Record stores were full of vinyl albums and cassette tapes. And for millions of teenagers, the Walkman made music personal for the first time. Mixtapes were carefully recorded song by song. And on streets across America, music followed people everywhere. By the mid-1980s, technology was quietly changing everyday life. One small console would soon appear in living rooms everywhere: the Nintendo Entertainment System. And a character named Mario was about to become one of the most famous faces in gaming history. But arcades were still the real battleground. Teenagers crowded around glowing machines, chasing the next high score. Meanwhile, a different revolution was happening on desks: the Apple Macintosh. In offices across America, IBM PCs were slowly becoming the new standard for work. Software came on large floppy disks that felt almost futuristic at the time. Home video cameras allowed families to capture their own memories. And on Friday nights, one place became part of American culture: the neighborhood video rental store. In 1985, Ronald Reagan had just begun his second term as President of the United States. The White House projected confidence. America believed the decade was on its side. Every evening, millions of Americans watched the same TV news. Newspapers talked about the Cold War, the Soviet Union, and the future of the world. But far from Washington, New York moved at its own relentless pace. Times Square was loud, bright, chaotic, the electric heart of the city. Wall Street was booming, and the famous phrase "yuppie" was becoming part of the decade. Air travel was simpler then. No long security lines, no scanners. Airlines like Pan Am carried the image of American power across the world. And as the sun set over the skyline, the year 1985 kept moving forward. On July 13th, 1985, something extraordinary happened. The world gathered for a concert. Live Aid was held at two massive stadiums: Wembley in London and JFK Stadium in Philadelphia. The biggest names in rock took the stage. Tens of thousands filled the stadiums. But the real audience was far larger. The concert was broadcast live to over 1 billion people around the world. In living rooms across America, families watched history unfold on television. For a few hours, music connected the entire planet. It became one of the most unforgettable moments of the decade. And when the final applause echoed through the stadiums, the world knew it had witnessed something special. In 1985, the mall was the center of teenage life. After school, teenagers walked the corridors for hours with nowhere special to go. The food court smelled like pizza, fries, and soda. Toy stores were full of bright colors and impossible dreams. Outside, kids still spent most of their time in the street. BMX bikes raced down sidewalks and empty parking lots. Friends gathered around vending machines talking about music, movies, and school. Gas stations glowed under fluorescent lights late into the evening. Families drove home together after long days. Suburban streets slowly grew quiet as the sun went down. In parks, summer afternoons stretched for hours. Backyard baseball games ended only when it got too dark to see the ball. Street lights flickered on, signaling that the day was almost over. Cities slowed down, but the lights never really disappeared. And inside homes, families gathered around the dinner table to talk about their day. In 1985, going to the movies was still one of the biggest events of the week. On Friday nights, lines formed outside theaters long before the doors opened. Teenagers were finding themselves in films like The Breakfast Club. Action movies were getting bigger and louder, and Rambo: First Blood Part 2 became a massive hit. And then there was Rocky IV, turning a boxing match into one of the decade's most memorable showdowns. Inside the lobby, the smell of fresh popcorn filled the air. The lights dimmed and the entire theater grew quiet. For the next 2 hours, strangers sat together sharing the same story. Behind the room, the projector quietly pushed light across the screen. And when the audience laughed, cheered, or gasped, everyone experienced it together. As the year moved toward its final months, autumn slowly arrived. School days ended earlier as the air grew colder. Rainy evenings painted the cities with reflections of streetlights. By nightfall, the streets felt calmer and quieter. Then the holiday season began to appear in store windows. Families filled shopping malls, searching for the perfect gifts. Christmas trees lit up living rooms across the country. On Christmas morning, children rushed to open their presents. Televisions played holiday specials as families gathered together. Outside, entire streets glowed with festive lights, and soon the sky filled with fireworks. In New York, all eyes turned toward the clock in Times Square. Crowds counted down the final seconds together. And just like that, 1986 had arrived. But the lights of 1985 still lingered in memory. And slowly the year began to fade. Teenagers stared out their windows, wondering what the future might look like. The sun set over the cities that had lived every moment of 1985. In quiet suburbs, the streets grew calm again. Children played their final games before the night took over. Television screens flickered and finally went dark. VHS tapes rested on shelves, waiting for the next movie night. Walkmans and cassette tapes held the soundtrack of the decade. And somewhere beyond the city lights, another year had quietly begun. But for many people, 1985 would always feel like a moment frozen in time.